I am a wanderer in a wilderness. When did I set off? Yesterday? Today? Was it long ago? I do not know. Was it before I learned to tell the time? Did I wander as a child? Was that how it began? Was that the start? I know not.
Run out from the football pitch to the Hebrew, to the synagogue then, and run in front of it. And so I used to come out before everybody else, like at 7:15. I would get there just before everybody else came out. I came running down, and if my father or my mother was waiting there, then they would think I had gone. And this went on for years. I mean, as I say, for a couple of years they hadn't seen me, and I used to go home each night, and my family would say, my mother would say, how was Hebrew? Oh, fine. But this particular time, as I said, I wasn't there, and so my father, this particular night, he just waited for me, and said, how was Hebrew? I said, fine. Drove me home, getting home. My mother said, how was Hebrew? And I said, that was fine. And she went, she lied. You've never been, you haven't been for 2 years. You're bar mitzvah in 6 months. What are you going to do?
My grandmother kept on my skin, seeps into my blood, burns in my veins. I am the seed of the desert, a grain of sand. Infinity is captured within me. I am but a grain of sand, blown in infinity.
The sense that things rationally must be explicable.
Quite an important event, and I can remember being called up, and I can remember this rabbi putting his hands on my head and saying Yivrechecha Adonai V'Yishmerecha, which is a blessing. And suddenly there was a light up in the window, and it felt like this light came down on top of me, it was, and I can remember, my God, what's happening? I'm just being totally bathed in light. Whether it was sunlight or whether I don't know, but and I can just remember just walking down afterwards in a kind of daze, not feeling any more religious, but it was kind of profound. And after that, I can remember never ever wanting to go back into a synagogue either.
In order to be
The soundless sound, the lonely sound. Only my shadow is my fellow traveler. We are of the same dust, but different dreams.
And I woke up in the middle of the night with this very, very strong dream of pillars and of barbed wire it was just so out of my experience. I just thought, what is it? And I tried to relate it to being like Jewish, maybe it's some concentration camp or something, and kind of pushed it to the back of my mind.
When I arrived in Auschwitz, this is after 3 or 4 days journey when you didn't eat and didn't drink and everything. I went over to one of the, I don't know whether the capo or they asked him where one can shave. And he answered me in the crematorium. I didn't even know what the crematorium was. The horror is not just the physical degradation and torture and hunger, but what goes on inside you as a result of all these things. For example, I saw myself in the third person singular. Here he goes, he does this, he does that.
There was a sick really flared up in a lot of Jews at that time, myself also. And I had a strong desire to want to go to Israel. And so in 1969 I did, looking for something, not knowing what. I got involved with all kinds of things. Started looking in all kinds of directions. I got involved in drug smuggling and went to prison.
When I had the dream and I got to Auschwitz, I thought that I have recognized the SS doctor. And then I left a barrack and went into another barrack. And during the night, up to that barrack, every other barrack was taken into the gas. I wasn't. That dream somehow forewarned me to be in a particular kind of psychic state. In this extraordinary state, I managed to do the thing which saved my life always. Standing one line instead of the other, saying one thing instead of another. And so I survived. But survival did not depend on being clever. It was pure luck, if it was luck.
The first part of the prison, we were in this closed part, which was very, very intense, and it was very dangerous. Lots of the prisoners had knives and guns. So after 7 months of learning how to live with paranoia, learning how to deal with fear, we were being walked through this prison, hearing doors closing, and the colours as well, dark and going through it, and then suddenly moving to an open part of the prison, suddenly walking through this alleyway, this dark alleyway, suddenly the guard opening the door, and there was this dream I had 2 years before, this fence, and I thought, I'm just meant to be here. And, I mean, that realisation just first of all fueled, well, here I am, what can I do?
There are dry wells in the desert. Those are the wells which are so dark, so empty. There is not even a stink in them. There is nothing to breathe. They are hard and dry and black. And when you fall into them, they are also bottomless.
First of all, distorted vision in this eye. And after about 2 months, I was diagnosed as cancer. And when I first heard, I was quite devastated. My father died, and during a very churned up period that followed, my eye suddenly the vision became more distorted.
Two fears. One, they may not accept me because I'm a convert, but more strongly, a fear of the fantasies of what will people think because I'm German. The most resistance I felt was very much from the professional Jewish world. On the other hand, I was again received very openly by a lot of Jonathan's colleagues. The sense sometimes that I, as a convert, had to know more and do everything better and than Jews who were born Jews. And I think that I resented. But again, I don't know where that comes from, whether it comes from my own sense of insecurity. There was the real sense of being vulnerable, of learning something new, a new language, new rituals. Looking back, it looks sometimes a very black period. You were very much left to your own devices.
About 4.5 years ago, my marriage broke down. Everything was chaotic. Everything that I had been either destroyed or blown apart by some force or another, and I was left wondering and not knowing what or who I was.
I may have had more time to think and do things had it not been for the fact that my 4th child was born profoundly handicapped. Many times he was at death's door, and we were summoned to his bedside, and he was in an oxygen tent, and he shouldn't have lived, and he did. He was a very serene child. I always felt it was a privilege to have Richard, and he did bring something to my life. As I became more religious, in fact, I saw such a spirituality in him. He seemed to be just a perfect little soul.
It was the afternoon of Yom Kippur, the most moving part, I think, of the Yom Kippur service. I had to the right of me an older man, a man serious about his devotion. And I had behind me a number of men who spent this time complaining about the rabbi, complaining that the only reason that they came to shul was because their wives made them. And this sort of went on and on until the older man to my right turned round to one of the men and said, "I'd like to remind you that today is one of the most solemn days in the Jewish calendar. And if you feel the way you feel, please leave the synagogue because you're spoiling my prayers." And one of these men turned round to the old man and said, "You mind your business and get on with your davening. Get on with your praying." And this just went through me, and I lost my temper. And I got up and I said to this man that I agreed with him, and I felt exactly the same way, and that if he didn't shut up, I'd throw him out of the ship. He rose to this challenge, and he threw off his colors, and I threw off my colors, and we were about to fly at each other. All the men sort of stopped us and said, no, this is not the time or the place. And it was all sort of calmed down. They were very, very quiet for the rest of the service.
I'd woven this fabric of lies to protect myself inside prison, you know. You have to become this very tough guy, you know, this very tough guy. And I didn't really, you know, it really wasn't me. Inside was this sensitive, frightened crackpot. What I said to myself when I was in prison was, I'm never, ever gonna, when I get out of here, I'm not gonna live a lie. I'm gonna be me. You know, I'm not gonna be what my mother wants or what my father wants or what society expects of me. But I'm gonna be me, and you know, and what is that?
From the Red Sea, Moses led the Israelites forward to the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they went to the oasis of Marah, they could not drink the water there, it was so bitter. Therefore its name was Marah, which means bitterness. And the people grumbled against Moses and cried, "What shall we drink?" And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. Moses cast it into the waters, and the waters became sweet.
I started teaching, I enjoyed it. I quickly got promotion, and at that time I was invited to apply to become the head teacher of the Jewish school. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, with my background, with my lack of knowledge, how could I possibly be the head teacher? I got the job, and as soon as I knew that I was going to be the head teacher of the school, I decided I had to do something about my Jewish education.
I came to the Cancer Help Centre first of all as a patient, because they take people who have been treated as well as those who've still got cancer. But knowing from the very start that I wanted to work there, and within a few months I was working there, and that felt like a really big turning point. There was a kind of growing awareness of a world that wasn't rational, looking for almost proofs of spiritual or divine or supernatural existence. It was like discovering, in working with patients, the voice of intuition, which had been maybe around a bit during social work, but fairly muted. It was during that time that I realised that saying that I was part of God wasn't such a ridiculous statement after all.
I think what also helped me then in the last few years was to find a religious community where I feel part of. And that released a lot of the pressure of having to do things properly. And there came a time when I suddenly realized, well, I'm forgetting that I'm a convert. That's good. It's nice. I'm a Jew.
We became one of the founder members of the new North London Synagogue. And very soon I found myself being called upon to take services. There was no rabbi, there was no chazan, and they needed people to lead services. So my first job was to find a teacher.
I tried lots of different philosophies, lots of different ideas, lots of different countries. Also got married, and by that time I'd left London as well, was starting to live in the country. And my marriage didn't work out, and my wife went back to New York. I tried to save a marriage and followed her. I had lots of time on my hands, and I was wandering through the galleries, and I went to the Metropolitan Museum. And I suddenly came into 20th century painting. And that was it. I really, at that point, knew, this is what I am. I'm a painter. It was like all the dreams, all the realizations, all the experiences was in this room.
It happened very quickly. It really was like the thunder and lightning. You know, you suddenly come through a tunnel and you're blinded by the light, and you're never the same again. I stopped driving on Shabbat. Then I decided I wouldn't cook on Shabbat, but I'd prepare everything in advance. And I remember when I decided I wouldn't switch lights on anymore. Each step I took, I struggled with. I can remember lighting my candles and actually feeling the change from the ordinary week to the beginning of the Sabbath. And it was something I could touch.
I went up to the centre for a meditation with a group of patients, and the person leading it asked us to find a healing symbol, or allow a healing symbol to come. And the one that came to me immediately was a little silver Sefer Torah. And it was really the first pointer that my own heritage was something missing. I came home here that afternoon and I made a phone call to speak to a cousin who himself had been a patient at the centre, and in fact he died that morning. And he was someone who had a great love for Judaism. Heritage and history all meant a great deal, and he had a lot of joy in it, and I'd become very fond of him. I loved him a lot. And then there was a third event that same day. I had to go back a few days. I'd been asked by a colleague of mine if I would be the godfather for his son, and he asked me if I would hold the baby for the circumcision. And I said, I'd love to, but no, I'm just too horrified by the idea. It's just making it look good. Only little ships come along here. When he rang me again that day, the day of the healing symbol and the day of my cousin's death, and he asked me if I would, and I said immediately, yes, I would. I just knew I had to.
One day around 1948-49, I had a dream of seeing myself as an old man, even older than I am now, with white hair, sitting under a canopy. On the right-hand side, there is a white cottage, and like, you know, on the photograph, a woman with a baby turning her head towards me. It was peaceful, total harmony. This vision came forcefully back time to time. so forcefully that I couldn't chase it away anymore. Then I began to teach in Germany, in Berlin, and I met there a student of mine, a young woman, who looked exactly as this picture have indicated. But it didn't make much sense, because I was married, so how is it going to fit into my life, I didn't know. But it did, because eventually after my second wife died, Brigitte has become my wife.
As a psychotherapist myself, I was in psychotherapy, and I was really shocked to find myself saying to my father dead, but to both of them, my father and my mother, I'm damned if I can let you see me be a Jew. And I came to realize that unconsciously I had been acting out of defiance to them. And what I thought was a freedom to find my own way as a secular person, that at least part of that was an unfreedom. Afterwards, I, in my mind, wrote a letter to my father. Dear Dad, I'm a Jew again.
I was painting in this particular pine wood and it was out there, and it was autumn, I think. I was just painting it, and it got into a point thinking, this is not me either. And just thinking, I can paint what's outside of myself, it's not difficult. What I want is to paint what's here, what's going on inside. I suddenly had to ask myself, who am I? What does it mean? Who am I? And having to do that kind of comes up with, well, actually, I'm Jewish. No, I'm not, that's just a label. What does that mean? I'm not Jewish, it's something I left behind. I want nothing to do with this, And, but you're Jewish. Shall I go back, and that dialogue that takes place, And I can remember thinking, well, I'm going to have to go back into the synagogue.
First of all, I had great difficulty with the notion of a God that's out there, a God that you can speak to in prayers, praise or ask things of him. That was very odd. But gradually I came to discover that the words in the prayers could be could be translated into another meaning, into an understanding of the divine within that we're part of.
I can remember sitting down, it was one Yom Kippur, and everybody's fasting, and I always have fasted. It's always been a time when I've always seemed to have gone back, so I was fasting, but not with much commitment, I didn't feel. And the rabbi was walking around with the Torah. There's a part where he comes out and he's brought the Torah down, and everybody's standing up singing, and I was kind of sitting there thinking, well, these are a bunch of idiots, actually. It's not me, I don't want to be part of that. And they're all kissing the Torah, and it was getting, I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. There's no way I'm going to get involved with this. This is all going on inside, and the rabbi, and he's getting closer and closer and closer, and I feel, out of respect, okay, I'll stand up, because everybody else around me is standing up, and he's getting closer, and I thought, okay, I'll touch the Torah with my talus, and I touched it, and it was just, boom, literally just a thud on my heart. And I just kissed my talus and sat down, and I thought, well, it's not about up here, it's here. The landscape inside was just a lot of memories, a lot of dreams, a lot of Jewish memories. I was touching my own language. I started to feel that I was mixing my own palette inside.
in the camps, I was not so concerned about God. The whole idea had become really almost ridiculous. Yet the notion of God as such, as it was taught to me, gave way to something else, unspeakable, unthinkable, unmentionable, a guiding force, call it what you like. And I know that several times in my life it has been active.
I hope you've all had a lovely holiday and you've enjoyed all the chagrin. How many of you managed to get to Sukkah? Good. The more you know, the more you realise you don't know. I would much have preferred to have had this awakening as a young married person within my marriage, bringing up my children. It came a bit late for me. But I just have to do with it what I can.
Others who will be taking leadership roles in influence and responsibility within the caring professions. Nee, nicht nur im sozialen Bereich. Over the last 6 years I've been the co-organizer of a Jewish Christian Muslim Women's Conference that takes place in Germany each year. And I think through that dialogue and through that work I've re-established a connection and a relationship to Germans and Germany. Sometimes something touches me and touches something at a depth. But when I then try to recapture it, it's not there, except it was there. Yeah, it's streaming out. It can happen when I'm working with someone and we just happen to work very intensely, or prayers speak to me, or just a sentence or word speaks to me, but then at other times nothing does.
So 1, 2, 3. When I'm singing, I do imagine myself as the great Chazan who I've listened to in the past, although I come nowhere near him. It's too low. It's too low. To a scarf and a badech of a timloch al kol v'yichud kakatu. When I get the mood right, when I'm singing well and singing in such a way that people will join in, then we use the word ruach, spirit. The spirit can be electric.
Which is going to be the door?
It doesn't matter, actually. You can have any way, the door.
Daddy, where's my put it?
Who wants to go into the wilderness? I mean, what for? What's there to offer? But to understand the wilderness, to understand joy and to understand compassion, you have to go in. You have to look at your own conditioning. You have to understand your mask. You have to see yourself. You have to see your own prejudice. You have to see your own hatred. It's almost like coming out of the wilderness with a sense of self-discipline. If anything, Moses was about freedom. Judaism is about freedom. It's the freedom to question, the freedom to disagree, the freedom to allow people to be whomever they are.
Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Whenever the cloud was raised above the tabernacle, the Israelites went onward throughout all their journeys. But whenever the cloud was not raised, they would not move till the day it would lift. The cloud of the Lord was above the tabernacle by day, and there was fire in it by night.
Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlid Shabbat.
I'm going to get married next year, and Elizabeth has 3 children. She's Jewish, and the children are Jewish by Jewish law. There's a certain kind of joy that I now sometimes find that I didn't before. And what I said about belonging to a continuity, that allows me to feel part of something when before I was just wandering alone. And being part of something universal is all very well, but it's very big.
I've decided to go back to college. First of all, to learn to read Hebrew properly, and also to do Jewish studies. I reached the stage this summer where I felt that I was really living on the edge of a cliff, and I was being pursued. And it's either to acquiesce and live a limited life away from the edge of the cliff, or you say no, and as there is nowhere to go, you put your trust in God and you jump off the cliff.
I was getting really to dislike the service, the liturgy. I no longer could relate to what it was being said. And I wasn't prepared to give myself to that. Jewish prejudice, Jewish racism. I no longer feel that I have to prove anything about being Jewish. I no longer feel that it's something to be ashamed of. And if I look at things that I disagree with it within Judaism, I don't feel it's a reflection of me any longer.
In the last few years, I felt much freer sometimes not to do something when I really felt it isn't possible for me at this moment. At the same time, to come back to it in my own time and then really feel, yes, I am part of that and it is part of me. It's like sometimes taking a holiday and come anew to the rhythm of the year and the rhythm of the day and the rhythm of the religious life.
This morning, when I woke up, I actually remembered the words you taught me last night.
What?
The Hungarian words.
Uh-huh. What did I, which were the Sam?
I don't know whether I remember. Sigh.
Yes. For some reason, it was an extraordinarily painful life, with extraordinary pleasures in it. And it may very well be that you can't have one without the other. What is very important to me is that I don't live for other people's expectations, that I live a life which is simple and as full as humanly possible, that we do at last what we want to do and not always what is expected of us. And we do, I think. And while nothing is permanent, loving and love is the nearest which can be. And to me this is number one. And after anything that follows, just follows.
There's no end of the journey. A funny thing, that having come to understand more about Jewishness, there's no end of the journey there either. There was a festival of Exodus, and then there are festivals on the way, but there is no arrival.
I'm being carried along, and I'll just see where I land. I don't know where I would eventually finish up. Nobody knows.
I don't think that I ever arrive, in a sense, not in this life anyway. Whether or not I will stop looking, I don't know.
Was it a dream? Or was there a face behind the veil? I cannot tell. But I know that wandering anew, I wander again and go, seeking my soul's promised land, the land of the beloved, just behind the next mountain. For all is you, and nothing